Hello everybody, welcome to this alter tutorial video. We're going to be altering this Return to Ravnica basic swamp today. It's one of my favorite cards to alter. I've done a couple of them before. I've got my setup right here. I've got my piece of cardboard to mix colors on. I've got some brushes from the dollar store. I've got some sandpaper from the dollar store. I've got some student level starter pack acrylics lying around. And just a disclaimer, I'm not the world's greatest artist or world's greatest card alterator, whatever you want to call it, but hopefully you'll pick something up from it. Anyway, I just want to show you guys how I make my basic land alters. Okay, so first thing we're doing here is I'm just grabbing my sandpaper and basically just roughening up this card, all these borders, that basically everything I want covered in paint. So that includes the borders and this large text box swamp symbol thing. You just roughen it up a little bit. We do that just to make the paint stick a little bit better on the card. Give it a quick wipe, get all that dust off after we're done, and that should make the paint stick a little bit better. So here we've got my paints. They're fairly basic. It came in like this 10 tube starter pack. It's acrylic paint. It's pretty important. Mixes with water. Really easy to clean your brushes with. Here I've got my brushes. They're all pretty flat. I don't like round brushes much, so most of my brushes are flat, and they're all from the dollar store. They're literally just a couple bucks. You get a whole pack of all kinds of different sizes, but the smaller is definitely better. So here I am mixing my first color. It's lots of black, a little bit of white, a little bit of this greenish, because I basically want to match the color that's on the side of this card right here. And that looks pretty black to me, but it's not actually fully black. If I would put full black on here, it would stand out like, oh man, that's way too dark. So I'm actually mixing the black with a little bit of white, a little bit of that green to make it more like a very, very dark gray with also a bit of a greenish hue to it. And even when I'm putting on this color right now, I'm in a bit I'm realizing like, oh yeah, that's actually not the right color just yet. So I'm adding some yellow to it to make it more of a yellow greenish dark gray hue. It's a lot of fiddling around to get the right colors, but at this point we're not too worried about matching the color 100%. We just wanted to match, fairly well, but this is just background color. This is just our first base layer. We just want to cover up the border so that whatever paint we put on next, that the border is not going to show through. We just want to cover it up so we can, highlight on top and nothing shines through on the border. So here I'm grabbing some white, just putting it into the same pile of color that I mixed before, and just basically trying to make this kind of like a mid-range color that matches the green of the brick texture that's on this card. So it's still fairly dark, a little bit of yellow in there too. If you mix the yellow with the black, it automatically turns it a little bit green, because black is more like a blue. If you mix blue with yellow, it turns into green. So the same applies for the black, really. So this is basically me trying to make a more accurate match of the color that's on this card. So with our first layer, we didn't really care too much, but now I'm definitely trying to 100% match this color that's on this brick wall on the card. So I realized that I might need even a little bit of brighter yellow to match the color 100%, so I'm just chucking the tiniest touch in there to get that done. And can't really stress enough how important it is to be really subtle with this. Like all of these hues are so close together that just tiny touches of a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white in there, it makes a ton of difference in actually applying the paint. It's all really subtle, lots of fiddling around. So I'm pretty much done with this big brush, and we're moving on to some smaller brushes now. So I'm just chucking it into this cup of water, making sure all the paint comes out of those brushes, and then I'm grabbing this smaller one. Still flat. It's fairly firm as well. I really like this brush, and I'm using this smaller brush to actually lay in a bit of more of a brick texture. So these little like horizontal taps to kind of give the indication of bricks and this wall texture. And we're doing this all around this basically the right and the middle of the card. Just laying it in there, bouncing back and forth with a little bit of black in there. Here I've got some black on my brush, and I'm just kind of like sketching in where the staircase is going to lead to. We're just basically continuing the staircase that's coming down from the original art, which is amazing, by the way. And we're just kind of like imagining where that staircase would lead to. We're just continuing on. So we've got the shadows in there. It's pretty nice to start out dark, and then I'll just grab a little bit of white for the highlight color, our very first little base highlight color. A little bit of blue in there, a little bit of yellow too, I think. There we go. Turns it into this nice mid-range green color, and just these horizontal brush strokes we just lay in the staircase on top. So definitely don't want to kill all the black. We want to do like every stair of this staircase separate, just making them bigger as we go down, making them wider as we get closer to the foreground. I also kind of want to, making it brighter, more colorful as we get to the foreground. Here I'm just touching up the side of this wall that's going to come down. Doesn't really matter too much at this point. I'm just sketching around, and we're definitely changing this up a little bit as we go along later in the video. So this is what we have so far. Our basic composition. This is what we'll be working with. I'm pretty happy with the way the staircase is rolling down. So right now we're going to be filling up this empty spot that I haven't actually covered with paint yet. So I'm mixing up this kind of like light green, trying to match the color of where that light's coming from on the card, and just very gently tapping, seeing if the color's right, and I'm realizing like, oh, it might be a little bit more yellow, so I'm filling around quite a bit, more whites, more yellows to match the color exactly. And we're just covering this up again, this time with a light color instead of a dark color. Because sometimes if you want to put light paints over dark paints, the dark actually shines through so much that it's really hard to get it as bright and light as you want. So this part I'm actually specifically covering up with a light color underneath, which means we have to layer it up a bunch of times, but at least it's not going to show up too dark. So I'm just little touches covering everything up. Cleaning the brush, give it a good wipe with some toilet paper. Back into that highlight. It's really important to clean your brush if you want to go lighter. Every single time you want to put on something lighter paint over something that's already on there, clean the brush, because if there's any dark colors in there, it's just not gonna pop, it's not gonna show up right. And we're just throwing in these lights that are bouncing off these walls, off these bricks on the left. They're fairly white, like it's still green, but it's definitely lighter than the original color we put on there. And just tiny little touches. We want to have that stone, that brick texture, so we're just tapping. Alrighty, so with this wall, it actually gets darker the closer it gets. So right now I'm just trying to kind of like gradient this area from dark on the left going to brighter on the right. So I've got the shadowy color. I took some black, and I'm just dropping in these vertical strokes. Once again, trying to match these brick textures or these rock textures, and very, very tiny, but lots of them, like vertical strokes. Every now and then I put in a horizontal stroke too, but we basically just want to make them look like bricks. So we gotta put in lots of little strokes to match that texture. We just throw in this wall, boom. Some shadowy colors over on that side of the staircase too. And at this point, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a nice contrast. It's blending in nicely with the original highlighty background from where the light's showing from. And here I've got some pure black, and I'm using this pure black to basically indicate a wall or a chunk of rock that is closest to us. So that'll be like the ultimate foreground kind of thing. And I'm just sketching that in. It's nothing definitive yet, but the pure black kind of indicates like, oh yeah, this is closest. This is where the contrast is highest. This is, this is definitely as foreground as it gets. And now I'm back into this like mid greenish color, and I'm just trying to touch up this wall here to make it more like a gradient and have some light bouncing around this bottom part. I realized it's a little bit too blue, so I had to add in a little bit of yellow in there to make it match the colors more. Cleaning the brush, I actually think, oh yeah, I'm swapping brushes here. So I've got this tiny little brush. It's more like a round brush, but this is basically like, oh yeah, we've got all our main colors blocked in, and it's time for some just some detailing from now on. And that's what I use my smallest brush for. And I went straight into this highlight color, and I like to make this brush like really flat. So when I'm loading up this brush, I'm trying to make the edge or like the tip of the brush kind of chiseled, so it's flat and then it's really sharp, so you can just like paint little edges. And when I'm touching down onto the card, it's the lightest touch you can possibly imagine, and it's usually just the corner. It's very subtle, extremely subtle. I really like this brush actually. It's probably my favorite to work with. It just makes everything pop so much. It's really fun. So I'm bouncing back and forth between fully light colors with lots of white, lots of yellow and green, and then going into some dark again, just adding in some black to make more like a mid-range color. And I'm bouncing back and forth between those colors to paint all these individual rocks. And here I just smeared on some old paint accidentally, but I kind of liked it. It kind of stands out like a bright highlight, but works out. I like it. As Bob Ross would say, happy little accident. But I'm constantly bouncing back and forth between these darker colors and then adding in some white again in that same old dirty color that's already on the brush to make a highlight again, and then I'm putting in black again to make a shadowy color again. So we're bouncing back and forth. And just every little brick has to be painted individually. So every little rock, every little thing, it needs a bit of highlight on one side, it needs a little bit of shadow on the other side. And that's what we're doing right now. Highlights on the right of the stone, shadows on the left side of the stone. At least for on that left wall. It's the opposite way around for the side of the staircase, but we'll get to that in a bit. More highlights, boom, 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 boom. This is lots of work. This is basically like the majority of the work is detailing, and you can fill around with this for ages before it looks right. So here I'm swapping to more like horizontal strokes to make it look like bricks. I realized that the vertical strokes weren't exactly matching, so here I'm more like small vertical taps and strokes to match the walls that are already on the card. And we're basically just going to apply this also to this wall that we haven't really touched yet over on the left. And as soon as you put that paint on, that nice green that we matched, it just makes the whole card pop. Hey, it looks pretty good. And we're just going to pull that through all the way from the bottom to the top. And towards the top left, we definitely wanted to make it a little bit darker. That's kind of how the card is on itself too. So a little bit of black in there to darken it up a little bit, and then we just tap horizontally. Boom. Here I'm going in with some shadowy color just to make every bit of wall stand out a little bit as if it's kind of crumbling. I kind of like that effect. It's a swamp after all, decay and stuff. It's kind of like the theme. So I'm erasing the highlight that we put on earlier because I didn't like it, and I'm just dropping in this wall that comes down from the right. You're going to be doing lots of fiddling around for this one too. But I'm basically grabbing a little bit more of a yellowy color because the main light that's shining on this is from the torches that's up top and not necessarily the natural light that's coming in from underneath the archway. So it's more like a yellowy hue as opposed to green that we used on the left side. Probably important to note. And going back into the greens and the blues, I'm touching up this wall on the left before we move on. Alright, so this is what we have so far. Pretty happy with the brick texture on the left and the light coming down through the middle. Yeah, I think we matched the colors pretty well, bouncing back and forth between those darker greens, lighter greens. It's time to touch up this staircase and figure out what we're going to do at the bottom. So here I'm using some pure black as the shades to touch up this wall on the right. Cleaning the brush before I go back into some highlights. Very important to make sure if you want something to show up very light, you gotta clean your brush very thoroughly. Make sure there's no remnants of any old darker colors in there before going into all your bright colors. So well, here I am touching up on black anyways. We're just dropping in some of this green color to paint the top of the arch. We haven't really done that yet. So this is going to require a couple of layers because it's a light color, and underneath these light colors you can still see the border, but we just drop in our first layer and we'll come back to it later. Here I am revisiting the side of this staircase, and just with very light touches, very small taps, I'm just laying in stone after stone after stone. Just every stone has to be like a separate touch. And a couple of like horizontal strokes to lay in a little bit of highlight on these staircases too. It really makes that wall, that side of the staircase pop, which I kind of like. And here I just grabbed some white. Whatever remnants of color were still on the brush, I just mixed that with the white, and just with a chiseled edge of this this brush, the lightest touch, I made sure that the brush was flat when I lifted it out of the paint. And now I'm just very gently touching just the corner of the brush. Super light touch because all this white is gonna make things stand out like crazy. You definitely don't want to turn this into a blob. It really has to be like just the edge, the corner of the brush, just the lightest touch. This is all this light bouncing around down that wall, down that staircase. Makes it stand out. Same applies to this wall on the right. And the light's coming from the left, so we're highlighting the left side of this wall. Making sure we don't put on too much. We definitely don't want to cover up all this black, all these dark shadows. That's kind of what makes it, you know, give it depth and make it look alive. There I put on a little bit too much, so we'll be erasing that in a second. Here we go, even lighter, a little bit of blue, a little bit of white, and just very gently, all these stones, just the left side of that stone, just touch up a little bit, give it a little bit of oomph, and then yeah, just making sure that every single stone has one on the left side of it, because that's where the light comes from. So now I go into a shadowy color. I left the old colors that were already in there, the white and the blue, on the brush, and I just grabbed lots of black and mixed that in. And now on the right side of each separate stone, of each separate rock, I put in a shadowy color. So the light came from the left, so we highlighted the left side, which means we have to shade the right side of each individual rock. So that's what I'm doing right now, and that really makes them stand out. Super tiny touches, still using that same small brush. And here I'm thinking, well, this kind of looks like a pile of rocks, but maybe not as much as a wall. We'll revisit that later to make it more like a wall. I'm also touching up this right side of the staircase, which probably need a little bit more shade on it, because that's, you know, it should be a very dark kind of like slope, a slanted kind of area, so not much light hitting there, so I'm just putting in some more shade and then a mid-range color on top to make it blend in. I'm just bouncing back and forth between highlights and darker colors and mid-range colors, going into whites, into blacks, into whites, into blacks again, to touch up all these little bits and make it look real. All these different hues and stuff. That's what makes it come alive. If you paint everything the same color, it's not going to stand out, so you have to change up quite a bit. Every single layer is slightly differently colored, and that's what makes it feel real. And we do this all across. At this point, it's literally being very nitpicky, just revisiting every single area we've painted, grabbing some shadowy hues and dropping in on this staircase, darken it up a little bit, make it look more rugged. So here's what we got so far. Really happy with how it looks. Very lively. Still got the bottom left to finish, and top. Here I'm just grabbing a blank sheet of paper to put on top of my old colors, because I noticed that I was running out of space to mix my colors on. So you definitely don't want to rub your card into all those mixed paints on the cardboard, because they'll stick to the bottom, and then you got that problem. So here you see me in very slow-mo drop a water drop onto the card because I messed up and I didn't clean my brush properly. But it's no big deal, we just grab some toilet paper. If you mess up like that, you put too much paint on, if a water drop falls onto your card, don't worry, just grab your toilet paper, dab it, and it's good to go straight away. Like, no panic. Touching up some shadowy bits. Basically just trying to blend in this bottom part to make it look dark. Going into our second layer on the top of this arch while we're at it. Bouncing back between some lights and some darker colors. And we're just trying to match the arch colors that are like below the little title box. It's a little bit darker on the left, a little bit lighter on the right. So touching that up as we go, until we feel like, oh yeah, that kind of looks like the same color, right? Cleaning the brush, this time not spilling any water drops. And what I wanted to do here was make one of these torches that you see on in the background on the right of this card, and I want to make a torch here over on the left. So I grabbed some really bright yellows. I just mixed some white and some yellows, and I'm just tapping, and this is where my flame is going to be. This is where this torch is going to be. Everything around it is super dark. And that's still just our pure black from before, and what we're going to try and do is create kind of a glow. So I've even grabbed some reds here. This is the first time we grab red. And what I'm doing is just very gently tapping in this really bright color. And you definitely don't want to smudge this up. Just very light. I'm tapping until just a tiny bit of paint rolls off, and then I'm trying to pull that paint that's on the card a little bit horizontally, so that you don't need a lot of paint for this. It's good to have very little paint to create this glow. So I'm just like tapping and then pulling sideways, pulling horizontally, and that kind of creates this glowy effect, because the paint eventually kind of runs out from your brush, and if you keep pulling it, it kind of distributes only a tiny little bit, and it kind of gets fainter and fainter as you keep applying this paint, and that's what makes it glow. That's what's good. And even now it already looks like, oh yeah, that's kind of like a natural kind of light. So very subtle, very little paint. And here I grabbed some black, some darker colors, and because this flame is so close, it should have like a really high contrast between the light and the dark. So I'm just dropping in some shadows of where I feel like these bricks should be. And it is very high contrast, you know? Very dark versus very light. Makes it come alive. Still trying to make these things look like bricks, so it's very square, very tiny squares everywhere. Here I've added in a little bit too much shade, so I'll probably bounce. Yeah, here I'm cleaning my brush, bounce back to my lighter colors, and then yeah, we'll just do the same thing again. Mix up some super bright orange, yellow, We'll just drop in some more highlight as we see fit. That's the great thing about acrylics. You could just, like, if you don't like something, just paint straight over it. It's all good. So now that we've got our torch and our glow kind of going on, we still need to blend this wall, the top of this wall, into the rest of the painting. So here I am making a little bit of a highlight color, but it's more like a greenish highlight color that we used before, and I'm trying to separate this bit of wall from what's behind it, just by putting in some of these shapes that kind of indicate like it's the top of the wall. And man, there's going to be a lot of fiddling for me to get this right, but we'll get there eventually. So here I'm like, oh, it's a little bit weird to have like this rounded wall in there, so eventually I'll be shaping it up to be a little bit more square. Here you see me putting in some shadows to make the bottom blend in a little bit more. And here I am extending that wall a little bit, just fiddling around, bouncing back between highlights and darker colors, trying to blend this into the rest of the picture, and I'm struggling for sure. But like I said before, if you don't like something, you just paint straight over it. And here I finally figured it out. Alright, so it needed just a little bit more like defined shapes in there, a little bit more dark in there too, a little bit more squarey shapes to actually make it blend in. Like now it actually looks like it fits, you know? It's lots of fiddling around with these shades and these bouncing back and forth between light and dark. Going back into my flame-like highlight color, just touching this up a little bit to really make it stand out, especially the center of the flame, and I'm dropping in like a very deep shadow right underneath it where the torch would be. And this is our card pretty much. I'm gonna touch up a couple more things, but most of it is now done. Just fixing up the staircase. I felt like the middle of the staircase wasn't really popping out enough, so just highlighting that a little bit. And that'll be it. All we got to do now is wrap up. So we tap it sideways. We're done with this. And I'm just grabbing this skewer toothpick kind of thing, dipping it in water and tapping it on the paper just to get rid of any excess drops, giving it a quick wipe with the fingers. It only needs to be like a little bit moist. It's very important not to touch your card with your wet fingers. Make sure your fingers are dry too as you do this, and with just tiny little circles and tiny little scrapes, scrape off any excess paint around the border that you might not want. Every now and then, dip your toothpick or your skewer in the water, tap off the excess water that's on it, and go again. And every time you've scraped off lots of paint, it should look a little bit liquidy on there, like very clear, but with remnants of the paint kind of mixed in. And you just wipe those off with a little bit of toilet paper. More like dabbing actually, not really wiping, just like gentle dabs. Alright, so it's time for me to wrap this one up. I'm just putting in some white to add a little tiny signature to the bottom. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it showed you at least one thing new, whether it's just in general how altars are being made, or how to start on making altars, or even how to paint bricks or flames. Yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more of these videos. I'm very new to this, so any feedback is welcome. Let me know what you would like to see, and I'll see what I can do about it. So for now, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, let me know if you want to see more in the future. See ya!